1981. Missile Command was a big hit at MIT, let me tell you. End of the world, nuclear war, explosions, missiles, rockets, it was really cool. They had 3 of them. By this time, they'd expanded into other dorms at MIT. And I was probably their first employee, even though there was no official company yet, because I took over the job of maintaining some of the machines at the dorm we were in. So they had 3 Missile Command games. Well, the revenues dropped off dramatically with Missile Command as the players got to be good at it. And so they said, well, we'll find a speed-up kit. There were these speed-up kits out in the market for asteroids and Galaxian and things like that. Must be a speed-up kit for Missile Command. No. Although, no, nobody could do it. Turns out Missile Command, very sophisticated game, and the little hack shops that were doing these simple speed-up kits couldn't figure it out. Well, Doug and Kevin said, gee, you know what? Hello. Yeah. Oh, okay, there we go. So they said, hey, we go to MIT. I bet we could write an enhancement kit for Missile Command. So in March, they started up a company. We could not think of a better name. So for just sort of placeholder purposes, well, we'll just call ourselves General Computer. Sounds impressive, you know, because there's General Electric, General Motors, and we'll be General Computer. Okay. So that's started during spring break of March 1981. We started working on our enhancement kit, which we called Super Missile Attack for Missile Command. Here's Chris Rode, hard at work on the Missile Command in our dining room in Brookline, which is where we were living at the time. Just between Chris and the Missile Command, you can see the Genrad 6502 development system that we bought for about $25,000 with a loan from Doug's mom. And got hard to work on that. It's a fascinating story. I'm just gonna, you have to listen to my California Extreme and talk about it a bit more. There's Kevin Curran on the left and Doug McRae on the right taking a nap. And this is sort of state-of-the-art development. We have our TRS-80 in the back with the 8-inch floppy drives and the daisy wheel printer. Who is that guy in the back? Hi, it's me with more hair. Hard at work on the hardware design for what became Super Missile Attack. If you look behind my corner, over my shoulder there, there's the whiteboard, and it says our first ad is going to run May 11th, so we'll start getting orders on May the 12th, and that means our software freeze will be May 19th. Typical software development, you freeze after you got your orders. Here's the board. I did the hardware design and the board layout for it, and it plugs into your Missile Command cabinet like that. And there's our ad. There's our ad. Full page 4-color ad with an 800 number. You've never really lived until you have a nationwide 800 number that rings in your bedroom. Get orders all night long. So everyone loved this kit. The arcade owners loved it because it was $300 instead of $2,500 for a new game. We thought it was great that we sold 1,000 of them. $250,000, that's pretty good for a handful of MIT dropouts. Who could possibly not like this? Well, yeah, maybe Atari. So in July, Atari sues us for $15 million. Now, let's see, what did they complain about? Copyright infringement, false designation of origin, trademark infringement, unfair competition. That's my favorite. Atari, this billion-dollar company, suing us. Trademark dilution. So, sued us for $15 million. Well, if it was fun being an MIT dropout and doing video game design, it's really fun going to federal district court. So we enjoyed that. And our first appearance in court. Whoa. Yeah, we're working, right? We're working, right? I think it might be too bright in here for it. Doesn't like me. Oh, there we go. So July 31st, we're in court, and Judge Keaton did not go well for us. We had to stop selling our kit. And so off we go. We're like, I think Atari thought we were just going to roll over and be scared by the lawsuit. And we said, no, we're going to trial. And we're going to start discovery. So we started doing depositions of people like Ray Kassar, president of Atari. Because, well, we have to find out how much unfair competition we are for you. We need to go right to the top. And Ray wasn't very happy about this, apparently, and pushed back at his attorneys, and the attorneys were like, Ray, we sued them. We really have to go and do this. So, but that's how we got to meet Ray. Well, it didn't look too good for Atari, I think. The PR was really bad, and it was obvious we were going to keep designing games for somebody. It might as well be for Atari. So, October 8th, we signed a development agreement with them. Come on. I can't get through all the slides like this. May have to put that. How about that? So they're going to pay us $50,000 a month to go away, stop selling our kit. And they dropped their suit with prejudice, and that's all anybody knew that was public, was that they had dropped their suit. And so we looked like golden boys. Like, oh, we're the guys who got Atari to drop their lawsuit. Nobody knew that we were actually developing a product for them. And I don't think Atari may not have expected us to develop a product for them. I think they thought we were just going to take the money and go sit on a beach somewhere. But we thought, oh, cool, we're just going to keep working away. Meanwhile, the whole lawsuit's going on this summer. Meanwhile, what are we doing? We were still working on another kit called Crazy Otto for Pac-Man. So all summer long, we're working on this kit. And if you recall the fine print in the previous slide, that we had to have the permission of the manufacturer to sell a new enhancement kit. And so we played a little scam on Midway and convinced them that we were about to market the kit, even though we were not allowed to. And so Midway, see, this was such a good idea to have my remote up here. So we signed an agreement with Valley Midway at the end of October. So this is pretty cool. Now we're MIT dropouts, and we have contracts with 2 top video game manufacturers in America. This is the Crazy Otto kit, which got a name change and came out as Ms. Pac-Man, which maybe you've heard of. So that was, you know, at this point we didn't know it was going to turn into the top-selling game ever in the United States, but we just knew it was going into production, and that would be kind of a cool thing. So January of 1982, just as a little aside here, Time Magazine does a cover story on video games. It's a really cool cover story. You should get one and read it. And here's this big 2-page spread that opens the article, and there is our Crazy Otto. Strangely enough, Pac-Man scuttles about the maze. So there's 96,000 Pac-Man cabinets in the United States. 3 of them have been converted to Crazy Otto and are out on playtest, and that's one that the photographer picks to take a picture of. So this has been, you know, famous for 30 years. Where's Crazy Otto, the mythical Pac-Man play? So we start working on video game stuff. We have video game ideas. We're going to start working on video games. Ray Kassar, president of Atari, Manny Gerard, who's president of Warner Communications, come to visit in early February because Doug suggested, hey, Ray, you should come and recruit at the Sloan Business School. So he's out doing interviews. And he comes one day, and then he brings Manny the next day. And we do a big show and tell, hey, look what we're working on. We're working on this, we're working on that. What are we working on? We have a new video game called Fireman. We're working on Food Fight. We're working on Molecular Magic, which is what became Quantum eventually. We've got music drivers that we're working on for arcade games, character development system, all sorts of things, right? All coin-op. This is all coin-op stuff. That's our agreement with Atari. We're going to do coin-op development. Well, Manny is real impressed. He's like, oh, this is kind of cool. You're showing us some fun stuff. Hey, you know what? I'm going to be in town in a month. I'll stop in again. Oh, we're going to show off for Manny, right? So all of February, because he came in early February, he's coming back in early March. All of February, we are just pounding in the hours so that when he comes back in early, oh yeah, Manny, look what I happened to get done over the past month. We're just going to wow this guy like you won't believe. So he comes back. This time he's got Skip Paul with him, who's the general counsel of Atari. And they are incredibly impressed by what we were able to, oh, sure, no problem. Yeah, we've been working on this for this past month. Isn't he impressed? And then we all went to Disney World the next day, 17 of us. And that's a story totally in and of itself. I'll tell you about that. That was our February. What's going on at Atari in February of 1982? Well, there's a, come on, it works so well.
I just stand back there and click the button when you say.
Whoa! Oh, that took us to the end. See, that's really bad. Yeah, somebody needs to go back and oh yeah, see, that took us to the very end. That's not good at all. Somebody want to restart my, oh, we don't all want to just sit here. I could just vamp for a bit. Oh, hey, whoa, did I do that? No, somebody else did that. Yeah, roll all the way back. Roll, back. Oh, right about, no, further back. Further back. Right about there. There, that's good. Yeah, there we go. Go, flag, thank you. Okay. Yeah, turn the computer. Yeah, so advance, next slide. What's going on at Atari? Okay, so here's this article from Mercury News. In February 1982, another group of VCS programmers threatened to leave. Okay, the first group left, that was Activision. The second group left, that was iMagic. So here's another group threatening to leave Atari, and there would be no VCS programmers left at Atari. So that's kind of a bad month for Ray Manning. Threw money at the designers, so I guess they didn't leave. Okay, next slide. So Kevin got a phone call. It's an interesting phone call because Kevin wasn't even in his office. This is pre-cell phones, right? So they called Kevin. Who tries to call him? It's Ray Kassar, Manny Gerard, Skip Paul. They're on the phone. They got to get in touch with Kevin. They call his office. Oh, he's not here. He's at our accountant's in Boston. Give us the number. Okay. Kevin's at our accountant, and the phone rings. It's like Ray Kassar on the phone. And the conversation goes something like this. Kevin, can you guys do VCS carts? Sure, okay. How big are they? Oh, they're 4K bytes, maybe 8K bytes. Kevin's thinking, okay, so the Super Missile Attack kit, that was 4K bytes. The Crazy Otto, that was like 8K, 10K bytes. He's like, he's gotten a feel for this. It's like, you're gonna give us all the documentation, right? Yeah, sure. What's we send it to you? Kevin's like, yeah, sure, I guess we could do VCS cards. Okay, I've got 7. Need them done by September. You know, Kevin's like, I mean, how long could it take? It's like 4K bytes. How long is it going to take? He's like, sure, okay, we can do this. So they negotiate the deal right over the phone. How much do you want, Kevin? It's like, I don't know, 75,000 a card. Okay, all right. Oh, plus like, 3-4% royalty. Yeah, sure, no problem. Boom. The money arrived in less than 24 hours. Boom. $500,000 into the new bank account. Right? Oh, sure, okay, I guess we're doing VCS cards now, right? So this is how we got from coin-op to doing VCS, and off we got. Who knew how hard it was going to be? So we got the documentation after we got the money. So the throwing the money was seriously true. Okay, next slide. So we start working on 7 different cards altogether. I can't recall exactly what order things went in, but certainly Ms. Pac-Man, we said, well, we're going to do that one. That's our own game. We'll do that one. Combat 2, which actually never came out, but we did that. Galaxian, interesting story with Galaxian. And Rubik's Cube, which got a name change. So next slide. Oh, here we are playing Warlords. Yeah, it's amazing how fun that game was when you had 4 people playing. And you see the cube there, the Rubik's Cube there. Next slide. Here we are doing development work on the GenRad system. We've got many GenRad systems, but this was pretty typical for the development environment. Next slide. This was actually a shot from our recruiting brochure, so that's Mike Horowitz, who worked on Ms. Pac-Man with me, hard at work with, again, the GenRad on the left and his Sony TV. Next slide. And there we are doing some music and some prom programmers and things, but this is sort of typical development environment for that time at GCC. Next slide. So June of '82, we had a brainstorming meeting. This was one of several, but this is a brainstorming meeting from hosted by Kevin. Next slide. interesting here, Kevin says, Manny Gerard states, we can shape the future by inventing it. And Manny wants us, General Computer, climb up and down the corporate ladder, becoming involved in all aspects of Atari, not just video games. We're a supplement for Atari's in-house engineering. So we're all of a sudden, we're like Manny's golden boys out there in Cambridge. We're like, cool, okay. Whatever we can generate, they're going to take it and run with it. So next slide. One of the ideas at the meeting, hey, develop a new base unit to replace the VCS. 5200 had already come out, I think, at this point, and was not, I mean, it was a beautiful machine, beautiful graphics. It lacked 2600 compatibility. Who knew that that was going to be a killer? But it really was. So, next slide. In September, right on schedule, we delivered to Atari. And there were others that leaked in. Ms. Pac-Man, I think, had already shown up. We'd already delivered that one. But we were able to do this. We were able to ramp up employment. We hired new people that spring, and off we went on this VCS development. But notice the bottom one, proposal for VCS extended RAM cartridge. If you start programming the VCS, you start realizing how limiting it is. Is that a polite way to put it? Okay, yeah, you've done it, right? 128 bytes of memory, of RAM. But as our programmer said, no, don't think of it that way. Think of it as 1024 bits, because each bit was precious. Bit 7 was the most important, because you could test it in one instruction. Anyway, so we started this, well, what could we do to VCS to make it better? Add better RAM, better something. We already got bank switch ROMs. What could we do to it to spiff it up? So that was extended RAM cartridge. Next slide. Thank you. Thank you for doing the slides, wherever you are back there. So here's mid-September. We have an idea for an extended RAM cartridge. This got taken off to pitch to Atari. Next slide. So we had an idea for what started to be called Superchargers at the time. So a spiffy something that plugs in and basically augments all the VCS, and then you would plug a cartridge into that. So here you can sort of see ROM and RAM and processor and stuff that's going to plug into the VCS, and then you can plug newer cartridges on top that have much more capabilities. Next. October 18th, we get a visit from a company called Vlsi Technology, VTI, which is one of the first of the custom designed silicon that is sweeping the industry, revolutionizing chip design in the industry. And they had come in during the summertime, and they came in October and pitched us again, and look, we're really ready to go, we're getting our tools, we're running these design classes. Really? Tell us about these design. Yeah, we got these 4-week design classes. You come in and you figure out we teach you how to do chip design, and teach you our tools, and you do a test chip. It's really cool. Oh, that's really nice. When does the next design class start? Oh, well, actually, it started today, October 18th. Oh. Steve, Kevin, Steve, get on a plane. 3 hours later, I'm on a plane to California to be there for 4 weeks. Next slide. This impressed the VTI people to just no end. I mean, they thought they were a fast-moving company. And here they got a load of us. And I got to go because I was the only one who really did not have a project I was working on at the moment. I was which was lucky for me, and I've been doing chip design the rest of my life, so kind of cool. So there I go off to Milpitas for a month to learn how to do chip design. I get the VLSI religion, how to do chips. This is amazing. It's really cool. You can do neat stuff. Next slide. So November, I'm back from the class, and we start, I'm going to teach everybody else. I'm going to spread the wealth and teach people at GCC. We've got tapes, videotapes so that it can run, and teach them how to use the tools. So there we go in November. Next slide. And we got this cool idea called Spring. I can tell you, not on the mic, how we came up with the name Spring. But Spring was life after Pam. Pam was 5200. And so we were like, what are we going to do? What could we do that would be after Pam? So we had this idea for Spring. It's got my name on it, but that's basically because I typed it up. It was a collaborative thing. Next slide. So Spring was going to be a really spiffy home computer / game playing unit. If you ever heard of the Mindset computer, it actually is very similar to how the Mindset worked. but it's 8186 based, and it's going to have really cool graphics, and we're all sprinkling it with these custom chips that we're going to design. We're all learning how to do this custom chip stuff. So custom line RAM and a custom playfield controller and custom. Gumby was the sound chip for Spring. Get the joke? There was Pokey that was in the 5200, 400, 800, Pokey, Gumby. So that was Gumby. Really cool sound chip, and then, oh, you could, by the way, you could use it in coin-op. Wouldn't that be nice? Next slide. The Q chip was going to do the playfield controller. Next slide. But then, how did this come up? How did this come up? We're busy working on Spring. We should do something in the meantime, just to help out the poor 2600. What do we call it? Well, TIA plus. Yeah, we can hack something out here pretty quick. And the joke was we were going to call it the pre-Spring Fling. That was the name of a dance at MIT a couple years earlier. So I thought that was a joke, because we'll get this out the way, and then we'll get back to Spring if we really want to. So what was TIA plus going to be? Next slide. So it was important to retain 2600 compatibility. So, we'll just take TIA and we'll add more players to it, right? Player missile. Two players isn't enough, we'll add more players. But then you realize really quickly that trying to maintain compatibility with TIA was just going to be a nightmare. I mean, the programmers were doing such bizarro, freaky things to it. How are you going to make sure that you are 100% compatible with all the 2600 games out there with an upgraded TIA? So very quickly it was, we'll just forget that. We'll put a TIA on the board, and we'll do our own chip, our own graphics sound chip. And when you're running 2600, you use TIA, and when you're running the new stuff, you use ours. So that's how we ended up with design a whole new graphics plus sound. Oh, how long did this take? We'll just watch this out. And it was going to be scanline based, use a line RAM, which is how coin-op games worked at the time, and how Spring was going to work. It's not a bitmap, it's a single scan line of graphics, which has a lot of advantages to it, and it stays pretty cheap. So next slide. What are you going to call your spiffy new chip? Next slide. Well, there was TIA already, and RNA mentioned this. Next slide. There's this liqueur, right? Tia Maria. And the goal eventually, we'll do a combo chip. We'll take the TIA and we'll have the Maria and stick them together. And so, next slide. Our code name was Maria. Actually, we had two code names. Next slide. Inside of VTI, they had to have a different code name. So the VTI side of the project was called Ginger. It started with a G because of General Computer. And inside General Computer, we called it Maria. So you'll see both mentioned. But to us, it was Maria. Next slide. So Maria, basically, it had a double buffered line RAM. So you have one line of video that's getting clocked out while you're loading there. The next line, automatic DNA with a display list. What should I put on this line? So it automatically DNA into it for you. It had sound. It had really cool sound. It used the same color phase shifter and the same sync as TIA. Because, again, we wanted to, eventually we said, well, we're going to combine the two chips, and we want to be able to combine those two, use the same things. VTI already had a TIA-compatible color phase shifter. Gosh, how did that come about? Well, we didn't find out until we took apart the ColecoVision VCS adapter and had a VTI logo on it. Oh, that's how we came up with it. We did it for them. So, all right, next slide. So what's the whole system? I don't know how we came up with the 3600 was going to be the name of it. So it's completely 2600 compatible, but there'll be more RAM, it'll have this spiffy graphics, it'll have spiffy sound, and we'll expand the cart connector so that you'll have all the address bits and the read-write bit out there, so you can do stuff out on the cart. All right, next slide. Gary Boone, got to mention Gary Boone. Gary Boone actually is a legendary guy that you've never heard of. He did the first 8-bit microprocessor ever at Texas Instruments, the first microcontroller ever at Texas Instruments, and he was a consultant at this point. In VTI, they were kind of scared that we had taken their design class and actually believed it, that you could actually design chips like they had taught us. which wasn't quite true. And so they said, we need someone who's in the industry who can keep these flaky MIT kids in line, somebody with experience. So they hired Gary Boone. He was working for VTI as a consultant, and they brought him in to basically manage the project and make sure that the chip got out the door. And we nicknamed him, over the project, we nicknamed him Darth Vader, because he would come walking into your office and start breathing, you know. Do you have your module done yet? Oh, okay. Gary's a wonderful guy. He's a good friend still. So, but that's mentioned Gary Boone. So next slide. So here's our schedule. We're going to start 1st of April, and we'll tape out by 1st of July, and we'll be done in time for December of '83. We'll be in production, and we'll have these boards in the store, and we'll be ready to go. We were ready to do it. We'd started software and everything. Okay, next slide. So by April 6th, here's a status. Yep, we actually have our I/O figured out and rough schematics, and so first week of, next slide. We're good. So here's a note from Gary back to VTI. Enthusiasm is great. These guys work at all hours. Yes, we do. So we were just zipping away there, starting with 1st of April. Next slide. Go to Disney World again. Next slide. That was great fun. Oh, so here's Gary's status report back to VTI in April. And he says, GCC thinks there's a good chance Atari will drop the ball somewhere. What gave us that idea? And that we won't make it out for Christmas of '83. But that we're still confident that Christmas of '84 will still have a good product. It'll still be worth doing. So we were already thinking that it might take longer for whatever reason. So next slide. Here's the project status from late April. Next slide. From Gary's point of view, back to VTI, it's Project Ginger. Next slide. So here's the schedule. Again, early July, we're going to be ready to tape out. We'll get parts back in late July. Next. It still had sound. Here's part of the sound schematic. Next slide. Spring hadn't died yet. Spring, we're still thinking this. We're just going to hack this little 2600 thing out the door, and then we can all get back to spring. So we're still talking about spring at this point. Next slide. And big brainstorming about spring and what we're going to do and how we're going to. So there's this, but more and more the company is starting to go over to this 3600. Next slide. So here we are, April through June. We're working on the Maria chip. We're working on a TTL breadboard for it so that the software people can start programming it and get their software going. Game system, mini game carts, and a proposal to do a home computer version. So next one. Here's John Mrazek working on his 7800. This is a sort of a stage shot. It was from a recruiting brochure that we used for the colleges, and he's looking at Centipede, and part of the reason that he's having trouble is he's holding the Robotron listing. So that's sort of it. And here's a little inside joke for you. So we reprogrammed the Genrad so that when the machine halted, instead of putting up the boring, machine stop halted message, it says, "He's dead, Jim." Such Trekkies. So, but there you can see the prototype sitting on top there. So there he's working away. Next slide. This is again another stage shot from our recruiting brochure, because this isn't really how you design chips, although we did have Coca-Cola. That's Tom Westberg on the left and Chris Rode on the right, and that's a plot of Maria. Next slide. This is the Maria Development Lab, so all of those little keyboards, those are Genrad systems for Maria development. Next slide. There's that fish tank. Lots more. And this must have been like Sunday morning with nobody around. Next slide. And there it says Maria on the screen. You can sort of see on the screen there. But this is a development environment for the software people. Next slide. And if you're doing games, you have to have the actual coin-op version of it, right? So we had a wonderful collection of coin-op games that we would use for just goofing off, but mainly for actual game development. If you're going to do a port of a game, you got to have the real game names. Next slide. Here's pretty much the whole company there around our fire pole. That's another fun story about the fire pole I could tell you another time. Cambridge building inspector did not want us to have a fire pole. He thought it was a safety issue, and we had to go to court again. And as you can see, we ended up with our fire pole. There we all are. Next slide. Some shots of, this is what we called our fire pole meetings every week. That's Kevin Kern on the left, holding forth on what's going on in the company and in the world and in the industry. And we're all sitting around listening to what he has to say. Next slide. Another shot from further back. You can see our glory wall there with the photos of the various products that we had worked on that had already shipped, and more of the Genrad, ubiquitous Genrad Contron development systems. Next slide. Fun on the fire pole. Go down, and you could go up too. People climbed up with stuff. So next slide. There's one of our vaccines that we did the chip development on. Milo and Opus were the two vaccines. Next slide. And that's the building we were in, 215 First Street in Cambridge. It was an old publishing building, and we had space inside that. So it was this wonderful old warehouse place redone. Next slide. So that's middle of 1983. We're working away, and we're nailing down the design of Maria, getting ready to shape out. There's all sorts of programming documentation. Next slide. Got to have a part number for your chip. What are we going to use for our part number? Gee, I don't know. What could we use for inspiration? Next slide. Yeah, again, we're, techie guys. What's the number of their friend the enterprise? So, next slide. Well, we're not NCC, we're GCC. So we'll be GCC 1701. So that was the Maria part number that we came up with, and it's actually on the die. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we taped out on schedule. At some point along the way, sound got dropped off, which is a real shame. Basically, it was a size of the die would have been really unwieldy if we had left in sound, and we said, well, we can still use the TIA sound, and you know what? We'll put a sound line out onto the cartridge so that if you put a sound chip on every cartridge, you can get better sound that way. So unfortunately, that's why 7800 games, except for a few, have cheesy TIA sound. But we did have a design for a chip, a very low-cost sound chip. We'll talk about that in a minute. The parts came back, they worked great. One missing depletion implant, which didn't really matter too much, and was able to work. So we were thrilled. On schedule, everything works. Next slide. Except one small problem. Next slide. This is a famous quote from Tom Westberg here. It has become apparent the current Maria architecture requires too much CPU time. So Maria, as it was originally architected, could display an enormous number of objects on the screen, but it required too much of the CPU to make it work. It was very VCS-like in that it required a kernel, and it required you to be synced up with the scan line. So every scan line, you had to set up the display list for that scan line, and then Maria would go and do the DMA, and DMA all the objects in, the graphics and DMA in. But you're spending a lot of time making sure those display lists are hooked up. So, okay, well, we'll modify it a little bit, and we'll have a display list. So you can set that up, and that gives more time for Maria. We'll automate this a little bit more. So that